2024 was a strange year for cinema. The Hollywood writers' strike cut down significantly on the number of big studio features releasing last year, but we also had studio layoffs, films getting scrapped for tax write-offs. The superhero flicks that were in many cases keeping smaller theatres open have become less dependable moneymakers, and we're feeling the knock-on effects from the streaming bubble beginning to burst. This has meant the cost of streaming services has steadily risen, and fewer bums in seats at your local theatre, which have resulted in cinemas doing more re-releases of old movies than ever before. But shambling on like a zombie that just doesn't stay dead, 2024's horror movies have gone from strength to strength. At any time in the past year, I knew I could go to my local theatre, book a ticket at the Odeon for a fiver, and spend a nice evening watching a new and exciting horror film. So now that the award season is wrapping up, and 2025's crop of pictures seems to be just as exciting as 2024's, I want to share with you my favourite horror films of the last year. Some of them there's a good chance that you've seen, some of them I'm willing to bet you missed, but all of them I think deserve your time, which is why I'll be telling you which streaming services they're on as well, so you can take a look for yourself. I'm a physical media collector though, so I recommend Blu-rays are possible. I've been making videos for almost half a decade now, and this is my first ever top 10. That's a YouTube achievement if I've ever seen one. So let's look back at my 10 favourite horror films of 2024.
Bobby, shut the fuck up!
Since this one's going to be starting the video off, I may as well kick off with a potential hot take. A Quiet Place Day 1 is the best of the series. The first two movies are by no means bad, but I find them hard to rewatch at times because I find that most of the characters are a little bland. With the exception of Emmett in the second one, they don't really feel like people very often who make decisions of their own accord. They make the choices they do or end up in the positions they're in because the story wants them to get to a particular point at a particular moment. And I find this pretty distracting when you've already seen them and know what's going to happen. A Quiet Place Day 1 could not be further from this. The entire film is driven by the active choices of its two leads, Sam and Eric. Every dangerous mishap is believable, which allows the tension to build unimpeded and we start to really care about the outcome. Time and again, Sam and especially Eric have easy ways out dangled in front of their faces. They could take shortcuts by abandoning the other one, or forsaking their emotional journey in favour of their physical safety, which makes the bond and rapport they build feel genuine, and actually get invested in them as they get invested in each other. The action is tense and makes good use of the sweeping New York cityscape. The Death Angels are at their scariest and most unassailable. The emotional moments absolutely sing, even with little to no dialogue. It fires on all cylinders in a way that makes its predecessors feel contrived and emotionally stunted by comparison. Worth a watch for sure, even if you haven't seen the other two. When I heard that Smile's sequel was coming out in 2024, I was really not interested. The first Smile is not a film I hold particularly near and dear to my heart. Let's be clear, it had some amazing strengths. Parker Finn really knows how to set up a scene, and the dramatic tension at a lot of moments is so tightly wound you can practically hear the straining in the air itself. But when the film gives you the time to breathe and take stock of events, you realise the whole plot is just not interesting and the concept rehashes a lot of older, better psychological horror movies. When you love, say, Ringu as much as I do, seeing Smile felt like kind of a joke, like watching a small child wearing its mother's shoes. Well, Smile 2 shows us what happens when that child is all grown up. Parker Finn knows his strengths from the first Smile and ratchets that movie's best bits up to 11. You could cut the tension in some of these scenes with a knife, and it brings out the best in the cast on so many occasions. But the dialogue and script are much improved from the first iteration. And even though the broad direction the film is going in is still pretty clear, that doesn't mean the film can't still surprise you. Finn said that he started the film's idea out with the ending and reverse engineered a way to get there, which does show at some points, but the whole film is such an experience, especially in a theatre, that it keeps your attention during the few lingering strange plot moments where a lesser movie might lose you. But my favourite part here is our protagonist, Sky Riley, and the phenomenal performance given by Naomi Scott. Scott is far better as our lead than Sosie Bacon was in the first film. Sky Riley is fleshed out brilliantly, feeling like a complete character on the screen whose life we get to understand from multiple different perspectives. It definitely helps that Naomi Scott herself is a singer, and former Disney Channel kid herself, which lends some authenticity to Sky's showbiz lifestyle, and gives her a believable level of physicality that someone who dances on stage for a living should really have. Side note, Scott also released a Smile EP featuring the songs used in this movie, in character as Sky Riley. And they're pretty cool. Blood on white satin gets stuck in your head really easily. You broadly know where this film is going to go, but it's the experience of getting there that matters for a film like Smile 2, and that's an experience I'm unlikely to forget in a while. It's still not exactly my favourite horror series ever. The Smile curse and its central monster just doesn't really hit as hard for me as it does for a lot of people, but I still love the film for what it's able to do. And for what it's worth, Naomi Scott definitely deserves more role where she can flex her acting chops. More than the live-action Aladdin let her do anyway. Apparently the Tomb Raider rights holders are looking to make more live-action stuff, and Sophie Turner has been pegged to play our new Lara Croft, but with respect, no, get Naomi in instead. Again, she's got the physicality for it. She's an actress with a huge amount of range, who could sell both the action skills and the emotional depth needed to effectively portray Lara Croft. So yeah, speaking of someone who didn't really like the first Smile, you should definitely give Smile 2 a watch.
Girlfriend ain't had periods since she got pregat. Is it possible having sex to a 8 months pregnant?
When I heard Immaculate was a long-term passion project by Sydney Sweeney, who both stars in and produced this film, I didn't know how that would make me feel. I've never been a huge fan of much of her filmography, but given that some of her best-known projects are teen dramas, romantic comedies, and Madame Web, that shouldn't be terribly surprising. I wasn't too sure what to expect when I first sat down to watch Immaculate, but if I had any expectations for this film at all, it would have definitely exceeded them. I don't want to talk too much about the plot because it's the kind of film I firmly believe you should go into blind, but it's a highly engaging watch that always has a new way to make you uncomfortable right around the corner. The production design makes the convent feel alive. Sydney Sweeney is fantastic in the lead role, the score is one of my favourites of the year, the film is just an all-round success. If I had a major criticism of the film, I think it floundered a little around the middle. They have a lot of plot stuff going on, but it's very clear they wanted to add more icky, scary stuff to the middle third to keep people on edge a bit, so they just slammed it in without really thinking too hard about it. To the film's credit, the scares and the ick are at least good though, sometimes really good. I'm talking like some of the best of the year good. But it feels dragged out sometimes, which is out of place in a film as deliberately paced as this one. Regardless though, Immaculate is a genuinely great film, one I imagine a lot of people missed, and it's a particularly good movie to watch on double feature alongside Conclave, because between Immaculate, Conclave, Longlegs and The First Omen, it's been a really bad year to be a Catholic in cinema.
There's a horror movie called Alien. That's really offensive. No wonder everyone keeps invading you.
Part of me hesitates to put Alien Romulus as high as number 7 on this list, because it is by far the most popcorny film in my top 10. My inner artsy-fartsy YouTuber review brain... Okay, let me try again. My inner and outer artsy-fartsy YouTuber review brain instinctually wants to mark Romulus down for its excessively referential and self-indulgent nature. Surely that should hold it back against something experimental and impressive on its own merit, like Immaculate. But as a long-time Alien fan, I feel pretty comfortable in saying that Alien has needed something like Romulus for quite some time now. The Alien franchise has evolved over the years, going from the blood-curdling terror of the original to the lifters and laser gun action of Aliens and Resurrection to the pseudo-religious epics of the Prometheus duology. Ever since the rampant success of Aliens, there's been a reluctance to commit to the invasive and violating horror of the original film, and that's kind of a shame. It is by far the most memorable part of that film, and the kind of thing you don't see in mainstream movies that often. Alien Romulus dragged Alien back to its roots in the best possible ways. Getting the guy behind the viscerally brutal Evil Dead remake in for this was a stroke of genius. The production design immaculately nails the Corporal Weyland-Yutani vibe that characterised the first movie. The xenomorph and especially the facehuggers are at their scariest in this one, and the human performers are fantastic. David Johnson especially steals the show, effectively playing two different characters as Andy. He walked away with the Rising Star achievement at the BAFTAs this year and thoroughly deserved the accolade. It may have just lost out on the visual effects Oscar this year to Dune Part 2, but the fact it got nominated at all is a hell of an achievement. And let's be honest, Better Man deserved the win for that one anyway. The electric response to Romulus seems to have kickstarted some life back into the series, with the TV series Alien Earth hitting Disney Plus this year, and Ridley Scott and Fede Alvarez both actively working on new Alien installments for the big screen. We can only hope Disney learns the right lessons from Romulus and we get to see bold experimental new stories that reach the high bar of horror that Romulus raised for the series. Oh, and please let Fede do that Alien vs Predator movie with Dan Trachtenberg. That would be a match made in heaven.
Spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out.
There's no film I have and ahhed about in terms of placements on this list quite as much as Longlegs. It's been as high as number 2 and as low as number 8 in various drafts of the list throughout the year. I'm on my 3rd or 4th watch now and I've noticed a phenomenon with this movie. I watch it and I love it. I sour on it a bit over time and then I go back, watch it and love it again. Watching Longlegs is a masterclass in tension, gorgeous cinematography and some astounding performances. Nick Cage is obviously great as Longlegs himself, but the real standout I think is our lead, Agent Lee Harker, played by the fantastic Micah Monroe. Harker is a truly one-of-a-kind protagonist. She's awkward and detached from the world around her, almost like she's running at a different frame rate to the rest of the world, and that gives Longlegs a truly unique perspective. Longlegs could easily have felt like a standard, brash, no-nonsense FBI agent catching a serial killer story, but Harker's oddness makes the viewer feel almost unsafe in her company, while also making her endearing in a way we don't see very often from characters in her investigative position. Longlegs is a film full of twists, and while what the twists are specifically aren't really anything special once you work out what Oz Perkins is going for, the genius is in the how. How the twists are done, how they are presented, that makes this film hit so hard, especially on a rewatch. Longlegs isn't what you'd call a slow burner as a movie, but it's one you will find yourself clicking with more and more over rewatches as you appreciate things you might not have done before. Truthfully, the only bad thing I have to say about Longlegs is that it was a bit, overhyped. The way the film was advertised and talked about in the run-up to its release made it look like it was some new face of terror, the next Silence of the Lambs or something. But while it did owe a lot to Silence of the Lambs, it made that first theatre experience very weird to sit through. But if you avoided that marketing, if you go into Longlegs with zero expectations, I'm confident you'll have a good time with it. A time that will only get better every time you rewatch it. Every time I go back to Longlegs, I find myself not necessarily liking it more, but appreciating it more. Understanding what's going on better than I did the last time, with more acceptance of the film's oddities or suspension of disbelief. And that's why I'd advise everyone here to go and see Longlegs, whether you've seen it before or not. I guarantee, one way or another, it will surprise you. And even if you didn't like it, Oz Perkins' 2025 movie The Monkey is even better and just hit cinemas, so go watch that instead.
Sammy, those are fucking onions.
We're entering the top 5 with a really fun vampire horror comedy that for most of 2024 was at the top of this list. The only reason it's dropped down to number 5 isn't because I sour on the film at all. I still adore Abigail as much as I did when I first saw it. It's just that every movie above it on this list came out in the last quarter of the year. So for most of 2024, Abigail ruled the roost. Abigail is the newest offering from Tyler Gillette and Matt Bettinelli-Olpin, the big brain boys behind Ready or Not and the last 2 Scream movies. And they bring the blend of brutal bloody splatter, endearing characters and a surprising amount of heart that characterised these films to Abigail. Alicia Weir puts on my favourite performance of any child actor this year, effortlessly slipping between the menacing criminal mastermind and Abigail's moments of vulnerability, both faked and genuine. The ensemble cast is charming and fun. A lot of them don't get too much death, but you don't really want these characters to die, at least at the start of the film. And Melissa Barrera follows up her leading role in Scream 5 and 6 with a satisfying action-packed performance. And it's just really funny. It's hard to get a bunch of actors who are this much in their element and give them a script by radio silence and expect them not to, bust your liver open with laughter. But before we move on to number 4, I just want to draw attention to my favourite performance of the movie. Can we just talk about how much of a gem Kathryn Newton is? She's a properly wonderful comic actress who's no stranger to black horror comedies. She was great opposite Vince Vaughn in Freaky a few years ago, and she played the lead in Lisa Frankenstein, which I'm telling you narrowly missed out on the number 10 slot in this list. By the skin of its teeth, seriously. If I could see Kathryn Newton playing a frazzled brain box with wisdom as their dump stat for the rest of my life, I would, no hesitation. She is so much fun, and she slips into the mad, splattery mayhem of Abigail like she was born for it. There's something for everyone in Abigail, so yeah, go see it.
Nosferatu!
If Abigail is the most madcap movie on this list, then Nosferatu is at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. 2024's Nosferatu is a horrifying plunge into the depths of evil and depravity, and it's done with all the directorial confidence and sincerity that Robert Eggers has become known for over the years. It would have been so easy for a lesser filmmaker to cop out, to forego the dark excesses that a film like this demands for self-awareness or a half-hearted stab at realism. But Eggers absolutely commits to his vision for Nosferatu, and it pays off beautifully. A lot of people said they were terrified watching this movie, but I was far too busy biting chunks off it like it was made of marshmallows. Every single scene is just a feast of rich, dark, gothic atmosphere that could not have been done without the absolute commitment to the bit that characterises the way that Eggers makes his movies. I'm so glad we live in the reality where Anya Taylor-Joy and Harry Styles are not leading this movie, because Nicholas Hoult and especially Lily Rose Depp are unforgettable here. Hoult is impressive as ever, but Lily Rose Depp was the film's biggest surprise. She's come a hell of a long way from Tusk and Yoga Hosers, and I look forward very much to seeing what the future holds for her. The clutch of Oscar nominations Nosferatu got for cinematography, production design, makeup and hairstyling, and cinematography are all testament to the absolute atmospheric feast that Nosferatu provides to viewers. And it's kind of a travesty that it didn't win any of them, not even production design. Sorry, Wicked, but until you're lighting your scene with hundreds of individually lit candles rather than studio lights, or covering Willem Dafoe in 2,000 live rats, I think it's safe to call it a snub, don't you? Anyone who was around for my Castlevania and Dead by Daylight video knows how much I love vampires. I wrote my uni dissertation on them, for Christ's sakes, which is why it means a lot when I say that even though he doesn't use the name, Willem Dafoe plays the best Van Helsing ever committed to the screen. Sorry, Hugh Jackman. Dafoe plays Professor von Franz, the film's monster understander-in-chief, who takes on the most direct opposition to Orlok, and his arrival signifies a protagonist's willingness to get shit done and start pushing back against the threat. Dafoe is, exactly what you expect he's going to be like in this role, lighting up scenes that were frozen solid with terror as he spurs the others on to action, and he's even responsible for a lot of the film's humour, without in any way compromising the tone. In the long and storied history of vampire movies, Nosferatu will be taking pride of place alongside the original as one of the all-time greats of the subgenre. Eggers has done it again. He's made a dramatic and compelling period epic that many have called the greatest film of the year, and that's not an undeserving accolade for this film to earn. In every way, it is a technical masterpiece, with truly immersive attention to detail and overwhelming tone that drags you into its grim and grisly world, kicking and screaming. Emphasis on screaming. And yet, despite that, it only makes number 4 on my list. Nosferatu is an incredible piece of cinema, no doubt about it. It is proper kino. It does everything right except for one critical thing that all the films in my top 3 managed to do. Innovate. It's a remake of Nosferatu by Robert Eggers with a bunch of stars at the top of their game. It's exactly as fabulous as it sounds like it's going to be, but that means that nothing that happens on screen is ever really going to surprise you. I love Nosferatu, I truly did, but it never surprised me. Not once. Unlike the film I have at number 3.
Tongue-tied in your tariff.
It's not every day you see an icon becoming an icon, in real time, right in front of your eyes. But when I left the cinema after seeing Terrifier 3 and walked to the bus stop and waited to head home, I knew that feeling, and it felt brilliant. Terrifier has always been kind of a guilty pleasure series for a lot of people because it's the kind of film that's not normal to rant and rave about in polite conversation very much. I can talk to my parents who maybe see 1 or 2 horror movies a year about Alien Romulus and all its callbacks to the movies they grew up with, or I can talk about the visceral visual feast that is Nosferatu's attention to detail. That's an appeal that almost anyone can understand. but I can't really talk in the same way about how much fun it is when Art the Clown breaks an off-duty Santa's face open with liquid nitrogen, or scalps a man with his bare hands in full view of his demon girlfriend, or does a terrorist attack. But even though these movies will never be for everyone, Terrifier 3 is the Terrifier formula at its best. A perfect showcase of how Leone and the Terrifier production team have grown as creatives as they truly understand the assignment. Terrifier 3 is in many ways like the Terrifiers that came before. It's a splattery, gory, and cruelly funny smorgasbord of gratuitous violence with a silent lead that wants you to have as much fun with the bloodshed as he's having. It's got everything you'd expect. Creative kills with practical effects that make you wince, all delivered by a gleeful David Howard Thornton, who it's impossible to truly hate, no matter how heinous he is. That's what you come to a Terrifier movie to see. No question about it. And this movie has all of that in spades. But what I was not expecting was just how much of a, proper movie this is. It runs a fun split narrative, with Art doing his shenanigans with his new demonically possessed girlfriend, and Sienna dealing with the very legitimate trauma that the events Terrifier 2 left her with. T2's misadventures borderline in the fantastical, and in many cases feel drawn out like Leone showboating a little bit. But Terrifier 3 is much more focused without losing that core blend of terrible pain and twisted chaotic fun. Terrifier 3 takes legitimately big swings that make the film stand out over Art's previous appearances. The surprisingly realistic and nuanced approach to Sienna's mental health, the choice to make Art arguably not even the film's primary villain while keeping his interactions with Sienna to a minimum, hell, even the choice to make it a Christmas movie and do so unashamedly, without feeling cheap or gimmicky. Terrifier 3 is just such a delight that I can't help but come back to. It's a trip to a theme park or a stop by the kebab shop on the way home at night. A film this desperately uncomfortable shouldn't be a comfort movie for me, but I think it will be for years to come. So much about Terrifier 3 exceeded my expectations. By all accounts, it should not have made the impact that it did. It should not be as good as it is, but it is, and I love it. Much like Robert Eggers leaving his mark on the movies he makes, Damien Leone is his own kind of auteur filmmaker who leaves his own indelible fingerprints on what he makes, and it makes me so happy to see him evolve as a filmmaker without forgetting that. Every movie is a trial by fire, and is getting better and better with every iteration of the formula. I've been following the adventures of that silly little clown from Miles County, New York for quite some time, and the ride has not always been smooth. But Damien Leone, David Howard Thornton, and Lauren Lavera are well and truly at the top of their game, and I only hope they continue to impress me with future installments in the series. Oh, and for what it's worth, the film really kicks misogyny allegations that Terrifier has been slathered with over the years right up the shit pipe. So, that's nice as well.
Hello. Oh, great. Mormon.
Terrifier 3 might have surprised me by being far, far better than it had any right to be, but the highly suspenseful religious horror film Heretic surprised me by existing at all. Heretic is a masterclass in doing a lot with a little. A main cast of only 3 people and a very limited set of locations in which our enigmatic antagonist Mr. Reed tests the faith of 2 more missionaries who entered a house they should not have been in. Heretic isn't particularly gruesome like Terrifier or Immaculate, but that is not the point of it. The whole point of the movie is to keep you permanently off balance, lost in the elaborate mechanisms of the house as you play the game the exact way that Mr. Reed wants you to play it. Speaking of Reed, there's only so far into this review I can go without just coming out and saying it, but I think Hugh Grant as Mr. Reed is my favourite performance of the year, or at least tied for my favourite with somebody else we'll be talking about later. Mr. Reed is quite different from most of the horror villains that we see these days, with far more in common with Tobin Bell's Jigsaw than anything else, and Hugh Grant gets to have great fun with this serious bad guy role that he's not had many chances to play before. Reed shifts and twists like a lizard molting out of its skin, going from an earnest intellectual to know-it-all lecturer, to blustering control freak to menacing torturer. Each transition smooth as silk, as he guides our protagonists on their journey into, well, hell. Our 2 leading ladies, Paxton and Barnes, are exceptional too. It'd be so easy to show their faith clouding their judgment or rejecting Reed's intellectual arguments on an emotional basis, instead of challenging them and challenging him on his reasoning when he asserts wisdom or dominance. It's these core 3 performances that tie the entire film together, that bring this pile of gorgeous production design and atmospheric lighting and enough twists and turns to make you dizzy and make it one of the most satisfying views of the year. It's so refreshing to see a film copy the most interesting parts of Saw, the mind games and the contrived scenarios and the questions about what we as people are capable of, not just the blood and the gore. It's what makes Saw sing at its best, and with its very own Richard Sawkins, if you like, Heretic dances to that same tune, just with a bit of a remix. And it's truly a tragedy that Heretic's probably all we're ever going to get to see of these fantastic characters. Hugh Grant's not exactly a franchise man, with the only one that he's come back for reliably being Bridget Jones of all things. So even if the will for the studio was to start a run of Heretic sequels, and it doesn't sound like it ever would want to do that, doing it without Hugh Grant would both feel like a waste and an inevitability. There's a world somewhere where Hugh Grant became the next Tobin Bell after this film, coming back again and again and again, to turn Heretic into a sprawling soap opera with a dozen flashbacks and fake-out deaths every movie. But that's not this one. We're going to have to be satisfied with just this one piece of absolutely timeless horror cinema, and that is good enough for me.
Hello, very nice to meet you. I'd like to know about sex change operation.
I see.
We all knew what this was going to be. A startlingly mature tale of transformation and conflict, with 2 leading actresses at the top of their game. A soundtrack truly like no other, and snappy dialogue that's impossible to forget. It's the movie of the year, and I'm so glad it's getting the award nominations it deserves. Ladies and gentlemen, my number 1 movie of 2024, Emilia Perez! Don't worry, only joking. The only horror in Emilia Perez is the fact that it got as many Oscar nominations as Gone with the Wind did. Nah, my number 1 horror movie of 2024 is something special, because it's also my favourite film of 2024 at all, and has rapidly become one of my favourite films ever. It's received 5 nominations at the Academy Awards this year, including Best Picture. It's the body horror spectacular that everyone, but especially I, have been talking about, and you might know it from just one sound. The Substance is a masterpiece, plain and simple. You know it's something special when a body horror film that used 21,000 gallons of fake blood for the final scene storms award ceremonies, almost wins the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, and rocks up with 5 nominations at the Oscars despite their known grudge against all things horror. Coralie Fargit is the mastermind behind this production, and from the screenplay to production and direction, she does not put a foot wrong. The film veers between powerful dramatic moments, disgusting grisly images, and some genuinely fantastic comedy moments, all mixed together, and the film wouldn't get its effect across without all these elements working together in harmony. The balance just has to be respected.
So respected.
Fortunately, Coralie Fargit rises to the task brilliantly. The world of The Substance doesn't try to be realistic. It's a bizarre Technicolor Hollywood that's wealthy and glitzy and bright when you're looking at it from the outside or from an apartment window, but at the same time it is arid, dry and already dead when you're walking the street with Elizabeth or Sue. It's not grounded, but it's real enough to convey its messages effectively. And the film is not subtle about these messages, let me tell you that. I truthfully didn't believe this film would work as well as it does if its messaging was more subtle. It's meant to be over the top. It's meant to shove what it's saying in your face so that the graphic body horror images don't feel out of place. It's like if Showgirls went in the teleporter from The Fly, you know? But this film would not be what it is, what made it special, without our leading lady, Demi Moore. Demi plays Elizabeth Sparkle, a former Hollywood star whose age pushes her out of the spotlight and drives her to ultimately destroy herself in the pursuit of the youth and glamour she used to have. The casting was not an accident. Demi Moore was once one of Hollywood's most bankable names, but as she aged and the body she was renowned for aged with her, she got fewer and fewer roles. Elizabeth Sparkle is probably Demi's finest hour in front of the camera. She was in so many ways made for this role, balancing the serious and the horrifying and the comic as naturally as the movie itself does. Perhaps it's poetic that she lost out on Best Actress to a 25-year-old playing a sex worker. Maybe art really does imitate life. So even though you didn't win, Demi, you absolutely brought the house down. So, bravo. and I hope you give horror another go in the future, because I'm sure I speak for so many Substance fans when I say we were lucky to have you, and we're not liable to forget that. I don't think The Substance was a film really made for people like me. The world of show business and insane beauty standards, of so-called hitting the wall. It's another world, it really is. I'm a YouTube bloke who hides away at home all day making stupid little videos. I don't exactly get out much. The only people who really perceive me much are you lot, the 50,000 assorted nerds living in my PC. And you more or less perceive me how I want you to. I'm about as separated from anything resembling beauty standards as it's possible to get. I mean, like, look at me. But even despite all that, there are so many moments while watching this film. Moments that bite. I'm sure we've all felt it in our own lives. Moments where you look at yourself and you feel so fucked up, so unlovable, that you don't want to show your face to anyone. That the thought of it just kind of makes you sick. Makes you want to run away and hide because you know you're just going to disappoint everyone. The Substance isn't just about the expectations of others, of society. It's about the expectations that you place on yourself. And the sheer lack of subtlety with which this movie operates makes it impossible to ignore. The film might be so unsubtle that it punches you in the face with its metaphor, but everyone's going to feel that pain and show that bruise a little bit differently. 2024 has been a mixed year for cinema. We didn't really have the big, eye-catching swings of the Batman, Barbenheimer, or Everything Everywhere All at Once, although Dune Part 2 might have come close. But regardless of your outlook on cinema right now, 2024 proved that come fair weather or foul, high-quality horror will always power through, and horror audiences will always show up to appreciate it. Let's not forget here, even the films at the bottom of this list are films that I absolutely loved and will go back and love again next time I watch them. Even outside of the top 10, 2024 had so many bangers. Lisa Frankenstein, In a Violent Nature, Sting, Infested, Maxine, Never Let Go, Cuckoo. I never got round to seeing The First Omen, but I heard that was great. Even Trap is not really a horror film, but it was bloody close enough, and it became an all-time favourite Shyamalan film of mine. And 2025 is providing a strong follow-up even after just 2 months, with Companion, Presence, Heart Eyes, and The Monkey already impressing me. There's still so much more to go too. I can't wait for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, or The Black Phone 2, or Predator Badlands, or Him, or The Toxic Avenger, Megan 2.0, Sinners 28 years later. Hell, we might even get Saw 11 this year if it gets out of the production mire it's stuck in. We're getting the last Conjuring movie too, which I don't really care to watch, but at least it's the last Conjuring movie, you know? The point here is that the world of horror cinema is an exciting place to be right now, even if the rest of Hollywood is literally and figuratively burning down. 2024 has made its mark on the genre's history as part of the 2020s horror renaissance, and I can't wait to see what 2025 has in store.